was a young dad. Started at 22, and which, you know, some would say, oh my gosh, that's too young. Looking back on it, I wouldn't have it any other way, because by the time I was in my 30s, you know, my kids were jumping through Little League and growing up in school. I think I still had some energy to play with them, you know, and still young enough to relate. And having the 3 boys, I think you need to interview my wife, because, you know, she's the one who had them and then had to deal with them during the day as I was at work. One of the things I think is we did by accident, raising the boys, is they were really never without one of us unless we chose to take them to a daycare for a few hours to get that social aspect of things. Sure. But that was one of, I think, the strengths that we had with these kids is, you know, they always had one of the parents pretty darn close, or within a few hours.
Dan, for you, how was it having a twin brother? Were you guys similar, different, opposites, total opposites? Kind of what was that?
So growing up as a twin, it was definitely unique. Looking back on it, especially, it was a good time, mostly because I always had someone there to play with. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword. It was really fun one day, and then the next it was like, get out of my life type of deal. So, you know, we had a lot of fun. We always we were brought up very well, and we were always given the opportunities to have fun and to learn and grow from each other. And, you know, I don't know it any other way but to be a twin, so I don't know what it means to be like an only child, or, you know, I guess your own person, but I wouldn't have it any other way, and I've really enjoyed, you know, I enjoyed growing up as a twin for sure. We grew up playing a lot of sports. We also grew up dancing at powwows. We have a very big Native American culture in our family, and so, you know, we had a lot of things to hold on to, and a lot of things that my parents could take away from us if we kept fighting, like not being able to play baseball and things like that. So, you know, they had those things to kind of hold over our heads, I guess you could say.
Like you said, and I think I said it, they fight like cats and dogs, but, you know, even as young adults, they would get so angry with each other, they wouldn't talk to each other, but there wasn't a day that didn't go by that they would not speak to each other. So, you know, there's that connection, and, you know, as a father of twins and an older son, you know, they just had a special bond. I don't even think they realized they had a special bond until, you know, we had that unfortunate loss of Matthew.
Matt played football at Archbishop Mitty, and not only that, he was a quarterback. Is that correct?
Correct, yeah.
What was that like, watching him play quarterback?
So I'll just start off real quickly. So Matt and I both went to Mitty, and so did Chet, which is why which is a big reason why we have the nonprofit sponsors a scholarship there at Mitty, and we both played football. He was a quarterback, and I played some wide receiver, and he loved the sport of football. In fact, we loved all sports, both of us, for the most part. If you gave us a bat and a ball, or a ball and that looked like a ball, we would figure out what to do with it. And he had a strong passion for playing quarterback. He was a natural leader, not necessarily by voice, but by his actions on the field. He measured himself by the amount of effort that he gave every day, and he made sure that his teammates saw that, and they did. They voted him captain on a number of occasions, and it made me proud to be on the same team as him, to be associated with him, because he just had a strong passion for what he did and took a lot of pride in making sure that not only he was doing his best, but that his teammates around him were, you know, giving the full effort and doing the best that they could as well. So that was one thing that I was always very proud about him for, was his natural ability to lead by example.
Who was Matt Garcia? What kind of person was he? What did he like? What did he dislike? We really want to understand who he was.
I mean, just from my perspective, he was all about all about his friends. Like, he was just incredibly giving and like generous to his friends. I mean, I remember when he was living with Dan at the fraternity house, he'd bring home to the fraternity house all this food from the High Life, as much as he could get for the guys, because he wanted to just share as much as he could with the boys that were around him. I mean, in college, he came down and took some time at Cuesta when I was at Cal Poly, and I mean, he was just a fierce friend to the people around him, and I didn't even know it all then. You know, when Matt died, all these people started coming to the different events and coming to our house and, you know, introducing themselves to us and just telling us the stories about the ways that Matt helped them, the ways that Matt was a part of their life, and it was inspiring to see what kind of a friend and person he was to everyone around him. So I think, I mean, generous, giving, selfless, those are like not overstatements.
To me, what I remember about Matt was he was always the life of the party. He wanted to make sure that even if he wasn't having a good time, that everyone else in the room was having a good time. That was his mentality, was them first, me second. And it was infectious. It in turn made everything turn around. It became everyone wanted to make him have fun, and it was just an infectious attitude. And you know, I was blessed enough to obviously live with him for a long time, and then he came to live with me at the fraternity house at San Jose State, and I learned a lot about him when he came to live with me. We were in very tight quarters, and you know, as much as it was like really annoying for him to be there, it was that short period that like we really reconnected on an adult level, and I saw how gracious he was and how he went out of his way to, because he knew I was doing him a favor by letting him live with me. He would always do the little things to make sure that he was, you know, carrying his own weight, and I always appreciated that.
To the best of your knowledge, what happened on the night of Saturday, October 4th, 2008, and into the early morning of Sunday?
Well, that's a tough one to talk about, but you know,
if you guys don't want to,
you know,
I mean, well, I from what I understand, I mean, he took some sort of medication, and it mixed with alcohol, and it just caused internal bleeding and amongst other issues that they kind of likened to an overdose, but the doctor said that he didn't actually overdose on anything. It was just a mixture of
that combination,
the combination of things that caused him to basically not wake up. I mean, my experience was basically driving around in the morning, getting a call from Dan saying, get to the hospital, and then the doctor telling me that they did everything they could. And
so from my perspective and just knowing a little bit of what I know, basically what happened was Matt and I both worked October 4th at Henry's High Life. And then he had a broken toe, and he was taking pain medication for the broken toe. He had run out of his pain medication, and he was going to go out to the bars with some friends in Los Gatos. And somewhere throughout the night, which this is the part we still don't know where, he was given or somehow took a drug called hydromorphone or Dilaudid, which is an extremely strong narcotic, and presumptuously for his pain of his toe, and then he was drinking, and to keep it not graphic, basically he asphyxiated or threw up throughout the night and wasn't able to compensate because his respiratory drive had been diminished by the narcotic, and ultimately they found him the next morning and rushed him to the hospital.
So what's that like to like not know what he was given, and then also who had given it to him?
So just for my real quickly, Dan, then you can jump in. So it was so the way that the whole thing went down, basically he passed away. And then they end up doing obviously an autopsy to try and figure out what exactly it was. The part that was that weighs heavily, I guess, was initially their initial autopsy actually came back inconclusive, and they were going to open it. Basically, I got a call, and they said we're going to reopen the case, and they were potentially looking at like foul play and different things, trying to figure out what it was, because the tox screens that they were testing for came back as negative, things like that, and so they didn't know what was going on. And then I got a call, I don't know, probably 3 or 4 days later or something like that, saying that they had figured out that it was a combination of these two that caused it. And so it does weigh a little bit, heavy on my mind, especially just remembering the call and he was with some of his best friends that night. I don't suspect foul play at all. I don't think it's that big of. I don't think that's the issue. It's just sometimes not knowing little pieces and not being able to kind of puzzle it all together is a little bit. Little unsettling, I guess.
He called his brother Daniel, and because they would always watch Sunday football. So at like 3 in the morning or so, he called him and said, "Hey, I'm not driving because I've been drinking. We're just gonna stay at Shane's house, and I'll see you in the morning for football." So he, I like to think he was being responsible from that standpoint and not driving back, drunk to the frat house. So, and that was the last that we, ever heard from Matt, because he had passed that morning, that early morning. And for me, I don't have a different perspective, so to speak, but I was working in the North Bay up above in Santa Rosa, and I was up there with some friends, and we had gone out the evening before for an event, and as a dad, I couldn't get back fast enough. He had already passed, and they were trying to get me back here so that they wouldn't have to tell me. And unfortunately, Chet had to tell me over the phone that Matt had died. And I'm just going, Chet, just tell me. I'm 2 hours away here, and I'm in bumper to bumper traffic headed. I'm above the bridge, headed south on 101, and I finally made him tell me, and he didn't really want to tell me over the phone. He just wanted me to come to the hospital.
So I knew the people that he was with. I didn't know the person that house it was that they were staying at in Muscattus, but I do remember getting a call Sunday morning. Actually, I think I'd just gotten a massage at the Hayes Mansion, and Shane just basically said, "You need to come to the hospital right now."
Come to the Valley
and
Valley Med.
Yeah, and then trying to figure out how to make the calls to the family members was, I remember not thinking clearly, but also thinking, how do I do this properly? So it was kind of like, kind of a surreal, even trying to look back on it now is still, it all kind of seems like a black cloud that just kind of scrambles your brain, and it's kind of like, is that how it really went down, or am I playing that back in my mind differently? So
there's a disbelief that it's really happening, and so and that I think is just the shock of the whole event. So you're a little bit in denial, and then and it kind of sets in over time that, oh my God, this is really happening. And it's not fun.
I remember having to make a decision whether I was going to allow the situation to affect me in a negative way, or were we going to make the best out of what Matt's life was, and allow his memory to live on through conversations, stories, things like this today. And I remember looking back shortly, a couple months after he passed, and thinking to myself, how could I allow Matt's life to bring negative to myself or anybody when he had such a positive outlook on life?